Hi, this is video 3, drawing 3, and lesson 3 of my Inktober drawing and video series. If you have not viewed the Introduction to Inkscape and Zentangles video, you should do that before viewing this, particularly if you are new to Inkscape or new to Zentangles. This video is going to feature the pattern flukes. First, I will show you how to create the pattern, then I will use the pattern in a drawing. This is the pattern flukes. Before we get started, I want to point out to you the snapping toolbar, which is located along the right side of my window. By default, the Snap to Grids icon is selected. I want to also snap to my page border, so I'm going to click this icon to activate it. During this video, we're going to use the rectangle and pen tools. I'll start by clicking on my zoom tool and zooming in. That way we'll be able to see things better. Then I'll click on my rectangle. I want to snap to my page border here, and when I say snapping, that means that when I draw my object, it'll land exactly at the spot that I'm snapping to. To snap to the page border corner, I click until I see a bubble that appears that says, still trying to find it, handle to page corner. When I see that, I press my left mouse button, it snaps, and I drag down here until I see handle to grid intersection, so that it snaps to the intersection of my two major grid lines. And now I have my square, which I drew with the rectangle tool. I want to make some changes to this, so I'm going to click this icon. It'll open up the fill and stroke dialog box. By default, I have my strokes, and that's this outline here, set to 2 pixels. So when I drew this, it drew a border around here with 2 pixels. And you see that in the box here. I also have my join set to round. And let's see, snap off here. If I zoom in on this, you'll see that this corner is rounded. Well, I'm going to zoom to fit the page in the window again. For the best results, and you'll see why a little bit later, I actually want to click on this, and I used my nodes tool that time, it really didn't matter, and I want to change the width here to 1 pixel. And I want to come down here, and I want to change the join to a miter join. So now my square has the border, or the stroke, the border, has a width of 1 pixel. And let's zoom in and make sure this is now a miter join, and it is. So this is squared off, and this is 1 pixel. And I'll explain to you why I did that shortly. Okay, So now when I look at my an example of flukes, I see that it has a little square here. So I'm going to click on my rectangle tool. Well, maybe not. I'm going to click on my zoom tool, zoom in, so we can see it a little better. And then I'm going to click on my rectangle tool to activate it. I'm going to come 3 blocks down and 3 blocks over. When the little bubble says handle to grid intersection, that's where I want to snap, so I'll click and I'll drag. I want to cover this area so it touches my other stroke, but I don't want to snap. So it looks like it's covering. I'm going to release. And for good measure, and since we already have the box open, I'm going to change this to a miter join also. That's not absolutely necessary, but it makes things fit in this little corner here a lot more neatly. Alrighty, so then I'm gonna, my selector tool is activated, so I'm gonna click on this little box to select it. And I want this to have a black fill, so I'm going to come down here and click the color black. Alrighty. So I'll come back out and look and take another look. So that's how we get started. And then we have a horizontal line coming across here and a vertical line coming across, I should say, down here. I'm going to select my pen tool, and it has several options, but this option right here, it'll allow me to create straight horizontal and vertical lines, and that's what I want. So I'm going to make sure this is activated, and it is, and then I'm going to click on my zoom tool, zoom back in, and okay, yeah, I might be zoomed in a little too much, so I'm going to click this minus button. Yeah, zoom back out a little. Okay, so now I'm ready to go back. Like I said, click my pen tool, make sure the horizontal and vertical line icon is activated, and then I'm going to click here, and handle to grid intersection is fine for this, so I'm going to click, drag, click, wait a minute, something went wrong, so I'm going to click undo. First I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to click edit, undo. Okay, so I'm going to click here, drag to here, click here, and come down here and click here. Press enter. I have my lines. Then I'm going to click here, handle to grid intersection, click here, and then come down here and click here. Press enter, and I have my lines. I'm going to zoom out, take a look. Yeah, it looks like that's what I wanted. So I need a system of columns and rows, it looks like. So I'm going to open up my tiled clones dialog box and use it to create my columns and rows. So I click edit, clone, create tiled clones. And before we get to creating our actual page of flukes, I want to point out something to you. Well, before I can create a tiled clone with this, I have to group it. So I'm going to click my selector tool, click and drag around it, and then click Object, Group. Before you can create a tile clone, the object either has to be a single object or a grouped object, and we have several objects here, so we need to group them first. And I'm going to create this. I'm going to use simple translation because that's the choice you want. If you want everything to be the same, just columns and rows. And here I'm going to enter 4 rows and 4 columns and click Create. That's what we end up with. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to grab this fluke, if you, for lack of anything else to call it. And this fluke is pretty much the same as this one, with one exception. When I started out, I did not change the width of this stroke to 1. So this is the same as this, except for this first box around the outside. Not these lines. These are 2 pixels. Just this first box along the outside. I did not change to 1, and I want to show you the difference. So, yeah, this is already grouped, but just for safekeeping. Then I'm going to leave it at 4 rows, 4 columns, and create. And what you'll see is that this line is much thicker. And the reason for that is, let's see, I'm going to find my original again, edit, clone, select original, then I'm going to bring it to the top and pull it out. So this is 2 pixels. So 2 pixels plus 2 pixels equals 4 pixels. So if you don't change this, this is what you'll end up with, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a matter of preference. But if you want to keep everything standard, as all your lines are 2 pixels, you want to change the original line, the original square on the outside here to 1 pixel, and the outside here will always be 1 pixel. But in here, in the center here, you've got 1 pixel plus 1 pixel equals 2 pixels. So all of the lines appear to be the same width. Okay, so now that you understand that, I'm going to select all of these and press my delete key. Come back over here, click edit, clone, select original. That selects my original clone, and whenever the original is selected, you can remove all of the clones just by clicking the remove button. And what I really want here is 10 rows and 10 columns. I'll click create, and I have my pattern flukes. So my original is selected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to the top and pull it out. Select my sample and its title. Move that down. I'm going to bring this here. I just want to keep this neat, so I'm going to make this flush with this major grid line. Make this flush the major grid line, and also make this flush with the major grid line. Then I'm going to come here and select my text tool, and I'm going to label this one original, original clone. If you're wondering what happened there, I'd hit my caps lock key. Okay, and I'm going to bring this down here. So that's my original clone. Then I like to take one of the clones, copy it. Oops. I hit the wrong thing. That was duplicate, so I'm going to undo. Oh, wait a minute. Duplicate. Let's see. Is there a duplicate there? No. Edit, undo, move. Okay. What I meant to do that time is to hit this right here, zoom to fit page in window. And I want to copy this. So it's selected. It's selected. I'm going to find my copy icon, copy it. Come over here, right click and paste. So there I have this. Okay, so I've copied this, so it's still a clone. Can prove it if I rotate this. It rotates along with all the rest of the clones. I'm going to undo that. And what I want to do is unlink this, so it's not a clone. So I click on the icon and I click here. This icon here will unlink this, since this is what's selected. So I'm going to click this icon. Should be unlinked. Yeah, it is. I can see because I can make changes to it. And if I click here and rotate it again, this doesn't rotate because it's no longer a clone. I'll undo that. And so I'm going to label this, click on my text, and I'm going to label this unlinked clone. I can close this dialog box and close this dialog box. Alrighty, so one of the beauties of creating your Zentangles in Inkscape is once you create a pattern, you can save it. You never have to create it again. We're going to save this. I'm going to click File, Save. That'll open up my Save dialog box. I have a little folder here for Inktober. This is a pattern, so I'm going to put this in the patterns folder. It's called Flukes, so I'm going to name it Flukes. It by default, Inkscape gives it an SVG extension. That's exactly what we want. That'll allow us to open this file up and at a later date and make any changes to it we want. I'll click Save. And we have our pattern. I have opened up a new window. I'm going to press Alt-Tab to show you that I still have my Flukes window open. I'll press Alt-Tab again to go back to my main menu, my main window. To start this drawing, the first thing I'm going to do is click File, Document Properties to open up my Document Properties dialog box. The background for this drawing is going to be white, and it'll be a lot easier to work with if I have a checkerboard background. So I'm going to come in here and click the checkerboard background option and close this dialog box. I'm going to be using the snapping, and the snap to grid is on by default. I'm going to click here to turn to snap to the page border. Then I'm going to click View, Page Grid, and temporarily turn my page grid off. I want to cover my page with my background, and before I do that, I want to create a layer. So I'm going to click Layer, Layers to open up the Layers dialog box. And what layers allow you to do is stack your drawing. Layers are, think of them as like transparent sheets, and you can see through each sheet to the layer below until you add opaque color. So if you want one item to appear behind another item, you put it on a lower layer. If you want something to appear in front of another item, you put it on a higher layer. Also, you can use layers to segregate things so you can work on them independently. But what I'm going to do now is this is every project or document that you create in Inkscape has a layer, and by default it's called Layer 1. If you click on the layer and then double click, you can change the layer name. And I'm going to change this layer name to Background. I'll press Enter. And I'm going to place my background on this layer. I'm going to click this button right here. It'll add a new layer. And I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to name that layer Design. And I'll create my design on that layer. I'm going to create it above the current layer. Now I'm going to press Add. So now I have two layers, a background layer and a design layer. I'm going to click on the background layer, and the layer that's selected here is the layer that you are working on. Alright, so I'm on my background layer. I'm going to create my background. I'm going to use the rectangle tool. So I'll click the rectangle tool to activate it. Then I want to click to my page. I want to snap to my page border here. So I have the little bubble that says Handle to Page Border. I'm going to click and drag. And I'll pull this down further. And again, I want to snap to the page corner. It's Handle to, I don't know what I said before, but what you should be clicking to here is Handle to Page Corner. So it snaps to that. I will zoom to fit window. And so there I have my border, and this is called the stroke. It's the outline. I want to fill this with the color white. So I just come down here and click on the color white. And so now we have a black stroke and a white fill. That's our background. Click on the selector tool and then click on the canvas so nothing is selected. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to lock this background so that I don't inadvertently make a change to it. I'm going to click on the design layer, and I'm now ready to create my design. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then press the Tab key. Come over here to my Flukes file, select my unlinked clone, and copy it. So I'll see here, click the copy icon, that copies it. I'll press Alt-Tab to move back to my other window, and I'm going to paste that. But before I do that, I'm going to turn my grid back on. Okay, and that was, in case you didn't catch it, View, and then I clicked Page Grid. All right, so now I'm ready to paste. I'm going to right-click and click Paste. Then I'm going to come down to and over to and place my fluke here. Okay. Now, for this drawing, I want to use tiled clone. So I'll click Edit, Clone, Create Tiled Clones. In this field, I want to select PMG. That's the pattern I want to create. And I have another video that goes into details about what these selections produce. At least it goes into detail about what the selections that use presume a rectangle as the starting objects produce. And I'll put a link to that video below this video. So if you want to get an understanding of these, or at least most of these, you'll want to look at that video. So, right, I wanted PMG here. So, yeah, that's what I'll select. And I want 6 rows and 6 columns. So enter those amounts in that field. Come down here and click the Reset button. And what that does is, if I made in a previous session a change to any of these, it sets them back to their defaults. I'm now ready to click Create. Oops, no, I'm not. I need to select my fluke and then click Create. And that's my design. Okay. I don't know if you can see it, but there are seams in my design. I'm going to reselect my original. I'll click here. I can click on any of these. It would be fine. And then I'm going to click Edit, Clone, Select Original. So anytime your original is selected, this Remove button becomes available, and you can make changes to your layout. But what I want to do is, as you should know, or probably know, or if you don't know, I'm going to tell you, whenever you create a clone, and that goes for when you create a tiled clone, the original clone is behind. We've got it selected now, and then Inkscape starts creating the tiled clones on top. So we have, I don't want to confuse you, there's the original clone is behind this one here. There are no clones behind these. So there's nothing behind these, but just in the original box, the original clone is behind, and then the first clone is on top. I want to raise that to the top and then drag the original out. And then I'm going to move that up here. Then I like to test to see that it is the original. And yeah, if I can make changes to this, that's the original. And as I said a few seconds ago, this seems to have a seam in it. It's very light, but it is definitely there. So I'm going to do my little trick. I'm going to click on the original, hold down the Alt key, and then press the greater than key. That makes this and everything else just a pixel larger, and that seemed to close up my seam. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these. That'll cause Inkscape to see them as one object. So I selected them all, and then I click Object, Group. So now they're a group, and then I want to center them. So I'll click Object, Align and Distribute. And this section here will let me to allow me to center them. I want to center them on the page. That option is already here, so that's what I'm going to use. Then I want to center them on the vertical axis, so I'll click this. And then I want to center them on the horizontal axis, so I'll click this. So now that's centered. I think I'll put another border on it. So I'm going to click here, click my rectangle tool, click, I'm at the bottom of the first box, and it says handle to grid intersection. I'll click to snap there, and then when it says handle to grid intersection, I'll click to snap here. Click my selector tool, click on the canvas. Nothing is selected. And that's it. I've created my drawing. I can't remember if I mentioned this, so forgive me if I already have. But I want you to know, if I delete this original, then these clones will all be unlinked. They will no longer be clones. That's because of the way the preferences are set. I'm going to click on this icon. That'll open up the Preferences dialog box. And under Behavior, you'll see Clones, and you'll see Deleting Original Clones. All the other clones are unlinked. If you select this option, they're all deleted. Something to keep in mind. All right, so we've got our drawing done. To save our drawing, we click File, Save. That opens up our dialog box. We want to find the folder we want to save in, and I've created an Inktober folder to save things in. This is my drawing, so I'm going to save it in my Drawings folder. I'm going to name this drawing Inktober -flukes and click Save. All right, so that's how I save my drawing. Now, if I want to export it so that I can post it on the web, what I do is click File, Export PNG Image. That opens up the export dialog box, and this is selected drawing, so that'll, if I left this selected, that'll export my page plus this, everything that's actually in the window. That's not what I wanted. I want to export the page, so I'm going to click here. The width of my page is 600 by 600. That's correct. So that's what I want. And then in this field, this tells you the path name, or where your file is going to be exported to, and it gives it a name. And it takes the name from the name you gave your file. It also includes that SVG. I don't like that. So I'm going to click here and open this up and change the file name here. I'm just going to delete the SVG part of that. And my file is going to be saved in my drawings folder with a PNG extension. So I'll click Save. And then this does not export it. It just sets the location. To export the file, I just click Export. And if I go to that file, folder, I should say, drawings. Let's see, here's my Inktober Flukes PNG. So that's it, and I have a request. If you like that video, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. There are more videos to come.